Hello, everybody. Welcome into the NBA Front Office Show. Tuesday, December 5th episode. We're going to talk about the in-season tournament. We'll talk a little bit about the trade market, a happy return for Kelly Oubre Jr., a number of things to dive into on today's show. If you haven't done so yet, hit that subscribe button on the YouTube channel. Don't forget to turn on notifications as well. That way you get notified, particularly when we go live on Fridays. Front Office Friday. Don't miss Keith's now iconic yell. Make sure you turn on notifications and you are subscribed to the channel. Keith, I'm having one of those days where I think it's a different day. All day I've been thinking today is Wednesday, and yet it is not. It is Tuesday.
Yeah, I'm a mess. I think it's just this time of year. From Thanksgiving to Christmas, there's like 9 million things going on in our lives here. And it's like I don't have the regular rhythm of basketball, even because there's all these weird off
Yeah,
days for the league. So like everything has me super thrown off. And I continually it's weird. I kind of feel like I know what the date is. Like I know today's December
yeah.
5th, but you could have told me it was Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe even Thursday. I might have believed you.
That's right where I'm at too. Like it doesn't feel like a Tuesday for some reason. And again, I don't know what it's. I watched Monday Night Football last night in addition to the NBA games, and still, I don't know. Tis the season, I suppose.
I
Um,
guess.
Speaking of last night's games, though, and I know this is your Celtics obviously came up short against the Pacers. Not trying to stick it to you on that or anything, of course, but some really fun basketball. I think that's the most important
Yeah.
thing here is that I'm sitting there watching these, and I can't escape the fact that as I'm sitting there thinking, we're getting playoff basketball basically right now in December, and that is a fantastic thing for the NBA.
It really was. The Just to start off with, the crowds were
Oh,
incredible in both
yeah,
Indiana and Sacramento. I'm very curious to see Lakers and Bucks crowds tonight.
yeah,
Do they bring the same energy? Because in theory, they know, hey, our real goal is to win an NBA title. And are their fans going to be as up for it as the fans in Indiana and Sacramento were? We'll see. But as far as the players and the teams went, the coaches treated all four coaches treated them like do or die, must win games.
mhm.
They had played shortened rotations, not only in terms of number of players, but also in terms of minutes for key players. Basically, teams kind of went with their top six guys, and that was about it in most of these games, maybe down to 7 or 8. And you might have seen a couple guys get in there for a few minutes here and there. But for the most part, they pushed minutes for starters, which was really interesting. I think also with the sense of, hey, even if we do advance, it's like every other day from here on out. And if we
Mhm.
don't, we've got a ton of days off.
Yeah,
Like I know the Celtics, they're going to
it's a nice
play.
week.
Yeah, they're going to play one more game now against the Knicks on Friday,
And
and
that's
that'll
it.
be their only game in like an 8-day window, where they play. So, or at least a 7-day window. So that's part of it too. I think it was, hey, even if we lose, we could say we gave it our best shot, and now we've got all these extra days off. And then the players were going really, really hard too. You could almost see that it meant more to them as well. And it was funny because it was the typical Celtics fans like, good, this is over. Now we don't have to pretend to care about it, which I think was a lot of, sour grapes make the
Yeah.
best wine, comment there. So it was, one of those things where it's like, you're just now being a baby about it. So, but two really, really fun games. If we get a repeat of that tonight, monster win for the league, no matter
Huge.
what, because those two games were awesome last night.
Yeah, they were absolutely fantastic. It was, it was edge of your seat type of action. You saw the players really going after each other, especially Celtics Pacers. It was just one haymaker thrown after another.
That 4-point play by Halliburton.
Unreal.
Just, it was such a bad shot too.
Yeah.
And then to get fouled on it, like it was, just unbelievable. What, I mean, credit to him. He did not have a very good first half. The Pacers as a whole did not have a very good first half. And he was completely dominant in the second half. You saw him completely control a game. And that's what the very best, I want to say point guards, but it's really the very best primary playmaker on a team, because it doesn't have to necessarily be a point guard, but that's what they do. You play the game at whatever pace they want it played at any point in time. Like it kind of the prototypical guys for me with that in the last, let's say 20 years have been Steve Nash and Chris Paul. They
Yeah.
want to play fast, you play fast. If they want to play slow, guess what? Everybody's playing slow. And Halliburton has that gene, absolutely.
It's not out of the question that, and again, it's unlikely because because this is rarefied air here, but it's not out of the question that someday we're talking about Nash, CP3, and Halliburton in the same sentence again, which is
Sure.
incredible to even be able to say that that's a possibility. To be able to hit that level is unreal. Halliburton, it's not the most aesthetically pleasing game, right? I mean, I appreciate the way he gets where he gets to and everything, but
Yeah.
there's not a lot of fluidity to like his step back jumper when he's got Al Horford isolated and he's crossing over. It's very herky jerky. Like
Sure.
there's not a lot of smoothness to it. And yet it works. He takes shots where I'm like, oh God, he's off balance. Oh, went in. It's and there's something to that where it's kind of endearing that his game's not perfect.
Yeah.
It's not polished, and yet he is still so good and so effective. And I'll tell you what,
And I
Keith,
think
one of
that's
the
what
things.
makes it
Go ahead.
effective. Sorry, I just think that's what makes it
The
effective
rhythm
is
is
the
weird for
herky
players defending.
jerkiness. Yeah, and the
Yeah,
fact that you're like, oh crap, he's shooting. Like he shouldn't
yeah,
be shooting from his body's half turned to the basket. Why is he shooting?
exactly.
And then he is, and it goes in, and those kind of things. The other thing I'll just throw in too, just because it's one of my favorite articles that anybody's written in the last couple of years. Caitlin Cooper, who now does like independent coverage of the Pacers. She did incredible analysis on how what's the one thing your coach drilled into when you were a kid? Do not jump to pass, right?
Mm-hmm.
You limit all of your options if you leave the floor. And Tyrese Halliburton jumps to pass all the time. And she did this long analysis on what happens when he leaves his feet to pass. And this was I think it was 2 seasons ago that she did this, but it was really good stuff. So I highly recommend. Might have even been last year, but whenever it was, go look
It's
it
up
up.
there.
Like Tyrese Halliburton jump to pass, and you'll get that. So sorry I interrupted your thought there on that.
No. That's a good one. I'll definitely have to check that out. I was just going to say, to kind of put a bow on Celtics and Pacers, I thought what really drove home how much the players were bought into this and how much this meant to them. Not only was it the way the Pacers celebrated after the game, but it was also how many times did we see Aaron Nesmith headfirst dive onto the floor for a loose ball? Like there were no stop signs, there was no pulling any punches. It was all out. We're playing this game to win it. We're treating this game like a playoff game, and it's single elimination, so that added to the fun of it as well. I put out there on X. I said the NBA in-season tournament's not going anywhere. Like
Nope.
you're getting games like this. No, and the NBA is celebrating. This is a win, and this is going to be a thing that sticks around for a while.
Yeah, my last 2 thoughts on this game specifically. One is also to build on to your point. The Celtics players were upset about
Yeah.
losing, more upset than you usually are in a regular season game. I think they kept the ultimate perspective of, hey, it's not like our season's over, right?
Right.
There's still, we still have 60 odd games plus, hopefully, double digit playoff games to go the rest of the way in this season. And then it turned into, but you could see they were not happy, right? They wanted to win and keep it going. So that's another good sign. And then the other thing I would say is with this is we already knew it wasn't going anywhere just because the ratings had been so solid. The in
Yeah.
arena attendance was really good for these. The social media engagements were really good, even if a lot of those seemed like they were people complaining about the court or complaining about the tournament or not. People were watching, right? And
Mhm.
that's at the end of the day. It's kind of like the old theory, right? In the blog world is, hey, doesn't matter if you comment on my article to complain about how much you hated it. You clicked on it and read it, so I'm good, right? I won. In a respect there, and that's not to suggest that should be your primary reason, but
No.
we've all been there, right? When somebody wants to just hate on you with it. So yeah, I mean, really, really good stuff from this one. And then I think from the second game, the Kings they got a little out of sorts for a period in the second quarter where it kind of started to get away from them a little bit. And then other than that, that game was played really, really well and at a high level too. You can see with the Pelicans, we talked a little bit about it yesterday. Trey Murphy being back, just what a difference he makes
Mhm.
to that team. He's so important to them to have that extra shooter on the floor that can really do stuff. And it's almost not enough to call him a shooter because he is a good shooter, but he's a really good athlete and he's learning and getting better at putting the ball on the floor and getting the basket. They can run basket cuts for him where it's not just, some guys who are shooters, they have to cut all the way through to get basically the only time they hit the paint is when they're walking through it to get to the other 3-point
Right.
side of the 3-point line. He's not that way. You can run stuff for him on basket cuts and everything else. So really, really good player. And New Orleans, when they're fully healthy and engaged, they just look like a completely different team than when they're missing a handful of guys. And shocking, right? Well, what
Yeah.
incredible analysis.
Yeah.
But for them, it really is such a stark difference where a lot of teams, they kind of get down one or two guys and you almost see, all right, everybody's got to play harder, play with a little bit more effort. We're all going to get into this. It's almost like they are just like, well, we're missing guys. We're expected to lose. So it is what it is.
Yeah.
And then I know Pelicans fans would say, and they're probably right, is when are we ever not missing key players? Because it seems like they always are. But yeah, when that team's fully healthy, man, they're a whole different level of team than what we've seen so far.
Yeah, and they can be a lot of fun. They can throw a lot of wings at you. They're a very good team. Brandon Ingram was fantastic in closing out that game last night. Pelicans, I think, are a bit of a tough matchup. They've got a few wins now over the Sacramento Kings on the season. Let's jump over to your Celtics. Some news that they plan to be active on the trade market. What are they going to look to trade here, and what are they trying to acquire if they're able to before February 8th, which is the trade deadline?
Sure. And this came from Shams Charania on the Run It Back show, I think. I don't know. He's on feels like 100 different things
Yeah,
now, but I think
at
it
the
was
same
Run It
time.
Back. Yeah, right. And then but he basically said, yeah, he was asked by I think it was Michelle Beadle, was like, Boston's bench kind of fell short in that game. What's going on there? And he said, yeah, it's expected they're going to be very active trying to upgrade the bench before the trade deadline on February 8th, which sounds bonkers, but that's only 2 months away, right?
Yeah,
Like this is
clock's
all
ticking.
gonna, yeah, it's all gonna come very fast now, right?
Yeah.
Like everything starts really going here in about a week and a half when everything opens up for trades, and then it'll be very rapid from there
Oh,
on out.
Keith, you know what? I just realized
What's
if
that?
we get some kind of Woj bomb or Shams, whatever we want to call it, while you and I are actually hanging out this weekend, when our wives are there, the looks that we're gonna get
Oh,
if
they're
we
not gonna
have
be
to go,
happy.
but at the same time, that would be absolutely epic.
That would be perfect. It would be perfect. And that's probably why, unfortunately, it won't happen, right? Because
It's true.
it'll wait for till you're back in the air on the way home.
That's when it'll
To go
happen.
get something.
Yep.
But yeah, with the Celtics, so here's the challenge, right? Okay, sure. I fully get like upgrade the bench. No problem with that. They're kind of Al Horford and Sam Hauser have been really good off the bench when the team is whole. And then after that, Luke Cornett's kind of okay as a backup big, should really be your third big, or ideally your fourth center. And then Peyton Pritchard has his moments. He's been in a kind of a prolonged shooting slump here, so that's a little bit of a problem.
Mhm.
But the challenge is Boston does they're not sitting on $10 million in tradable salary for a guy who doesn't play. So that's a problem number one. So their best single salary matching trade asset right now is the 6.2 million traded player exception, the TPE that they have. They do have most of their own first round picks. And they've got a bunch of second round picks. So they would be able to make something happen from that standpoint. It's just the matching salary is where it gets hard. Now, I don't think they're in the range to go get, and I'm throwing this out there because we've talked about them
Mhm.
forever, but Zach LaVine, right? They're not
Yeah.
even in the range to go for a guy like that. Wouldn't make sense for them to be in on a guy like that. But really, you're talking about if you're going to use the TPE, you're talking about a player makes $6 million or less. Or what you're talking about is, all right, let's put together 3, 4, 5 of these minimum contracts, get up to about 10 million in matching salary or so and go get a guy that way. Now that could happen because we have seen Brad Stevens did it as recently as last season, or I guess it was 2 seasons ago. He basically emptied out the entire bench and went and got Derek White in a trade, and then they made a couple other trades. And there was a point where it's like the Celtics have like 8 dudes on the roster right now in the middle of the season, and then they went out and signed guys like Nick Stauskas, Nick Rocks.
Oh
and,
no. We were just talking about how good the Kings have been,
Right,
and
know,
they had maybe a tough matchup with the Pelicans, but then we got to harken back to some dark moments for that franchise.
That's more of a Nick Stauskas now thing, right? Sauce Castillo, back
Castillo.
in the day. That's going back to the old NBA Twitter days when it was like the West Coasters and the diehards are up watching the Kings at night. But yeah, and then they filled out the bench with a bunch of guys at the end of the bench because it was all right. This is what we can do right now. So I wouldn't completely rule out the idea of we're going to trade for these minimum salary contract guys and go get somebody who makes $10 million to fill out the bench. And then we'll go right back to, we'll call up 3-4 guys from the G League. And that's how we'll do it. The other side of that is it's hard for another team to take in 3 or 4 guys. So that might be part of a bigger trade where there's a lot of moving parts happening and those kind of things. So we'll see what happens with this. Active, sure. How big of a move it's going to be. I just don't think it's going to be all that big.
Well, but this is good for the overall trade market, though, because so far, Keith, everything has been Chicago, with, maybe every once in a while somebody whispers Toronto, right? But I think people are so tired of Toronto the last few years doing we might trade everybody and then doing nothing.
And then doing nothing,
well, I guess they went and got Pirtle, but still.
That was the other way.
That's right. That was the other way. Instead of trading players away, they ended up being a buyer. But to start hearing some other teams, and this is again pretty normal. We're going to start hearing, hey, this team might want to make some moves here on the trade market. And once again, the story from the other day that it was 2 first-round picks for Dorian Finney-Smith, and that's where we're at right now. But the more we put the puzzle pieces together, and this is going to be not something's happening tomorrow, but over the next few weeks and even over a month, we're going to start to get a better sense of what the market actually looks like, and teams are going to start getting more realistic. So I just add this as another piece to the overall trade puzzle that, hey, the Celtics are going to be looking to do some things. Yeah, the Bulls have some incentive to do some things. The Raptors, what are the Hornets going to do? Could they be a team that's in on Zach LaVine that maybe we're not talking enough about? What happens with some of these other guys? We're going to start to get a sense of how robust the trade market is or isn't. And the more teams that we can add to it, the better for us and the better for NBA fans, because the more exciting it's going to be.
And that's so 2 thoughts. One is Celtics become the first of the contender tier of teams outside of Philadelphia, who's basically been mentioned as, hey, they may do something early, right? And do a little bit of pre-agency and go get a guy in the wake of the Harden trade. So now Boston joins that list as, they're going to look for something. And others will come in there as well, right? We're going to hear this probably about Denver and the Lakers and Minnesota and, a bunch of teams. It'll probably be for a lot of those teams. And then Milwaukee, obviously in the East. But for a lot of those teams, it may be, they're going to do moves around the edges. It's probably not going to be quite as big a blockbuster type thing. Or Phoenix, especially like Phoenix, Boston, Milwaukee, they don't have a ton of tradable salary. So that's where they're a little more stuck to, it's probably going to be a smaller type move. I would say the other part too, to this is it takes a little while for the trade market to develop, because in order for the buyers to get what they need, there have to be sellers. And right now, there's only a handful of sellers that are out there. And, because nobody wants to, a week after Thanksgiving, give up on their season, right? Everybody's like, wait, I can't, how do we sell to the fans for the next 5 months? Like, we're out. So that's a big problem. So
that's a big, how do you sell to the fan base? Hey, we're pulling the plug already. Go buy tickets for our game in January. And and it goes hand in hand with this. How do you go to ownership and say, hey, we're gonna lose a lot of games by trading away these guys, but we're gonna get a nice draft pick. They're gonna be looking at, okay, who's gonna be in our arena for the next 5 months or whatever,
Exactly.
4 months.
That's why I thought, and I'm not criticizing the reporting that came out of
Sure.
Detroit over the weekend, because I think the reporting was really solid. But the idea of the Detroit front office saying, like, we need more time to see this through. Well, you made the problem. So, of course, you want more time to try to fix it. So, like, that's not like, okay, I get it. But at some point, it becomes, where are we going with this? That are you going to get given more time? Because the Pistons, I think we can pretty confidently say, uh, you're not going to have you're not coming on a 17-game win streak here to completely reverse the fortunes of the season. At least that would be probably the most shocking result I could ever expect to have here. So it's we're in a point where it's like, yeah, you're going to be bad, and it's going to kind of be what it is the rest of the way.
All right, let's jump over to the James Harden situation, because we talked about this a lot yesterday. And James Harden obviously saying, that he expected a max contract from the 76ers. That didn't come, and that's a big part of why he was so upset with them. He also felt like he got frozen out, like they were not calling him. And so he got upset, and that's what led to his departure with Philly. And obviously, there's much more nuance to it, but that's the short version. But Harden also added in the piece with Sam Amick that his reps met with the Rockets, which, Keith, that shouldn't that be sounding the tampering alarm here? If he's having his representatives meet with another team, despite the fact that at the time he was under contract with the 76ers?
It should be. Now, if you are a longtime front runner here with us and you've watched the show, I apologize. But if you're new to the show, I don't care about tampering. And very rarely does this. I just don't care about it. It's the only time I care is when a guy's like a year or two into a multi-year contract, and it's very clear that they are trying to engineer a solo trade market for themselves. Then I'm a little like, all right, that's not cool, because like you don't even have the ability to go. Something like this, yeah, it is what it is. But here's where I do care is the NBA can't selectively enforce this stuff. Either enforce it or don't, right? Like either crack down on Houston here. And unfortunately, it's the team that's going to get in trouble. It's the Harden and the Clippers certainly aren't going to get in any trouble.
Sure.
Harden doesn't even famously have like he's got an agent now, but he didn't even really have like he has representatives, which I don't know what that means.
Yeah,
so
what
that
exactly
becomes
is that?
Who do you punish there? Because you can fine agents, you can take away their ability to rep players and those kind of things with the Players Association. But ultimately, it'd be the Rockets that get in trouble here. And I've seen some of the reaction be, well, how do we know he's under contract? Because he was never not under contract with Philadelphia. He went at the end of the season, right before free agency, he picked up his player option. So he was under contract right up until he picked it up for the next year. And then that what that does is that extends his contract another season. So he was always under contract. So him saying we met with the Rockets, and he was very ambiguous whether or not he was there. He said representatives and Ime Udoka. So now this could also be the Rockets could be like, whoa, wait, like that was our coach, like our front office who really makes these, they weren't in on this. So who knows? But he basically came out of that saying, yeah, there was a conversation and they met, and they talked about it. And that's where it was. So I'm very curious to see how the league reacts to this, if there's any reaction at all, or does the league just kind of be like, maybe this one's better if we're all like, let's just all move on. Let's all move along and go. But if I was Philadelphia, Miami, Chicago, teams that have been penalized in recent years,
Right,
I would
exactly.
be a little like, what are we doing here? Like, this is very selective enforcement right now.
Yeah, why? And again, we've talked about plenty of situations where the punishment is not all that severe, to the point where teams are like, okay, we lost a second rounder, but we got the player, so it's worth it, right?
Yeah.
But even so, there is some type of a punishment, and so if some teams are getting punished, then others aren't. For this, when it's, I mean, obviously he'd be under contract with the 76ers, meeting with the Rockets, talking about coming and joining that team. You can't do that. So if the NBA just says, well, it's all part of the James Harden mess, what's going to stop the next team after that to go, well, nothing happened when you guys met with James Harden. Why can't I meet? Why can't we meet with this guy a week before the free agency starts and sign him to a contract? I mean, that's or agree verbally to a contract, I should say, because he can't officially sign it. But that's the problem. I think you're spot on. You have to either totally enforce it or not. And if you decide to totally enforce it, that's fine, but get ready because the tampering police would have to be on high alert all the time. And tampering happens every year. If your GM is not tampering, you're behind because everybody else is doing it. That's the problem that the NBA has. And then how do you police that? What about player to player contact? How do you police that? I think the easier solution is just to say, look, as long as you're not, during a game or after a game, going up and grabbing a guy out of the opposing locker room and saying, hey, come join our team. As long as you're not making it ridiculous, we're going to just throw our hands up and say, tamper away.
Yeah. And it got ridiculous for a little while where teams weren't getting the draft pick penalties, but coaches and organizations were getting fined large sums. And coaches were even like, I don't even know if I can comment how good a player is.
Yep.
Right. It'd be like, yeah, the guy just gave us 50, but I'm going to be very cautious on even saying much because it's going to be read into, oh, he's talking them up because they're tampering and those kind of things. And that's like way too far into this. My personal feeling has been, if a player is a pending free agent, when their season is over, they can start talking to whoever they want. And that's just let them do that. Like, what are we hurting? Like, all you're doing is giving more information to the player and the team. Because let's just use this one as the example. If I'm the Rockets and it's, post draft and that time between the draft and free agency opening, if I'm the Houston Rockets and I'm looking at this and saying, yeah, we can get James Harden. What's the problem with letting them have a conversation if Harden's like, I need the max and I need the role that I had of, the highest scoring player in the league and all that stuff. And for what it's worth, Harden also refutes that part of it. He's like, that hasn't been me for a few years, which he's actually right on. He's like, I've been more of a playmaker than scorer for about, 3-4 years now. But anyway, let's say that was the conversation. The Rockets like, all right, that's not best for us. That's better than that conversation having to be had supposedly, at midnight on July 1st. Like that's, or I guess 6 p.m. now on the 30th, because that's when it actually opens. So, and then that gives Harden, hey, if he meets with 5 teams and they're like, we're not giving you a max, or well, I might as well pick up my player option and move on, which is in reality, that's really kind of what happened here, right? We know there was no max offer, so I might as well pick up my player option and figure all this stuff out from here. So I don't have a problem with that. Like I said, I have a problem with, for example, Jaylen Brown, right? His supermax extension hasn't kicked in. Let's say Jaylen Brown's like, where I want to play? I want to play for the Charlotte Hornets. That's the only team I want to play for. And it's like, I want to be traded. And then he starts, nope, I'm only going to Charlotte. And Charlotte's like, yep, he's only coming here. And that's going to be how it is. Well, that's wrong. Like, that can't be a thing because he still has multiple years left under his contract.
So here's Gordon Hayward and a 2nd round pick, and you're gonna like it or something, right?
Yeah, and you're gonna deal with it because that's the best you can get. So like, those are the things where I'm like, that doesn't make sense, right? Like, that's not okay to me. But if we're down to a free agent, like, is already talking to people, whatever, like, who cares? Just, let's all move on with this. But this is also why too, if you don't think tampering's happening, let's use a guy like Pascal Siakam, who's going to be a free agent after this season. 100%. Any team that's considering making a trade for Pascal Siakam is having the conversation of, do we have a chance of re-signing him? Because otherwise, our offer is going to be a lot less, or maybe we don't even get involved at all. So anybody who thinks that's not a thing, like, all right, I have a bridge in Brooklyn I would like to sell you. Like, contact me after the show.
All right, let's jump on here to I guess a little bit of injury news. I hate injury news when it's bad. Good injury news, but so we've got a little bit of both here. Jeremy Grant, concussion protocol. Not good. Of course, the Blazers, they're not gonna rush anybody back or anything like that. But Jeremy Grant now in concussion protocol. Anthony Simons is coming back at least. So there's something. But, I look at this and I don't think this is going to necessarily negatively impact Jeremy Grant all that much. He'll go through concussion protocol. He'll eventually make his way back. Not to say that concussions aren't something that can negatively impact you years down the road. Certainly can.
Sure.
But in terms of the way the Blazers need to look at him, which is as a potential, I don't know if they're going to move him, but potential trade chip at the deadline, I don't think this is going to change too much. I don't think they're going to hold him. They're not going to rush him back to try to win games, but I think that as long as he's back and he's playing up to, and this isn't something that lingers or anything, come January, come February, I think we're going to hear Jeremy Grant's name on the trade market.
Yeah, I think so too. Just because he's a guy who can help a lot of teams, because you could play him at either forward spot. You can, ideally, he's best suited if he is your third, fourth, fifth best guy there. So that becomes an easy fit. The contract it's big, but it's not. He's not making max money, so that's different as well. You're not having to take on $200 million in remaining salary, so that's important just to retain a little bit of flexibility from that. So I'm with you. Yeah, and Simons comes back. It feels like, and it's partially the reason some of these teams are bad teams, but it feels like when your season has gone south, which Portland's, we kind of knew that's where it's going after the Lillard trade, but it just feels like this is how it goes. Like you get a week with all your guys, then they start going down. And then as one comes back, another one turns around and goes out. And then you're just kind of in this cycle for, maybe the rest of the season. And that's always a tough spot to be in. So I think in a lot of ways, I'd rather, if I was Portland, it was like, if you're going to make a choice here, I'd rather have Anthony Simons back because I feel much more confident he's a part of whatever they're building. Let's see what he looks like with Scoot Henderson. Let's see what he looks like with Scoot Henderson and Shaden Sharp at the same time. Let's see, can that trio play together and be a group that can play real minutes versus Jeremy Grant, who, like we just said, he may not be on the team 2 months from now. Never mind, 2 years from now.
Right. Exactly. All right. A little bit of good news. Kelly Oubre back tomorrow. This is after, I mean, we talk all about, ACLs and Achilles and sprained ankles. The dude got hit by a car, and he's going to be back. So that's great to hear. There was concern, especially this is a guy who wound up having to take a veteran minimum deal, was having a pretty strong season so far for the 76ers, and then gets hit by a car. He's essentially betting on himself. He's playing for his next contract. So good to hear that he's on the mend and that he is going to be back out on the court for Philly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, big time. And I think the important thing here with this from Kelly Oubre is the Sixers need him, right? Yeah. I mean, obviously, the important thing is he's okay and he can play. And I think that goes without saying. But on the court, excuse me, Philadelphia needs him. They really need him back out there because they need that bench scoring, and they need bench scoring with a little bit of size there, and that's what he was giving him. A bunch of people have kind of said, does he start? Do you think he'll go back?
He was starting for a bit there.
He was starting. I think he goes back into the bench role, which is what they always had in mind for him anyway, because I think they've really settled into when everybody is healthy and able to play. And this team sounds like all these teams that aren't in the quarterfinals, they got a big break on the front end here. A lot of them did. And Philly got, I think, a 4-day break. They had a bunch of guys who were out with illness, and it sounds like the flu ran through the team or some version of an infection. So now you've got, when you're settled, you've got Embiid, Harris, Batum, Melton, and Maxey. That feels like a pretty solid starting five. Now you're coming with Oubre off the bench and a whole bunch of other guys. You're in pretty good shape as you start to move into the holiday period and into the middle of the season. And he's coming back early enough now, too. You're going to get a couple good months of, all right, what do we need, right? Can Kelly Oubre fill a need that we don't need to fill that through the trade market or anything like that? So really important that they get him back on the floor. And great to see that he is back.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's finish up with this. The scouts attending high school games in Vegas. Keith, who are they there to look at again?
Cooper Flagg.
That's what it is. Everybody's there. Everybody's excited about Cooper Flagg. Keith, I went to the dentist this morning, and this is just random aside here. And the hygienist was talking about her son plays AAU and he's into basketball and everything. And we were talking a little bit about what I do and all that kind of stuff. And she was she said, my son, he's 12. he's he's all excited to go to different NBA games, but he said, if an NBA game is too expensive, can I just go watch Cooper Flag play? And I'm like, that is so telling of where things are today, and where things are around Cooper as a prospect.
Yeah, I am extremely fortunate. He goes to school at Montverde Academy, which is about 20 minutes from where I live. So I have been over there. I've seen him play several times. He is unbelievable. He is right up there with the best high school players I've seen. Like, he is very, very, very good. And he's what makes him a little bit different is he's really good on both ends of the floor. Too. He's kind of got a really incredible all around skill set. The people who don't know him are going to really get to know him next year because he's going to be at Duke, and Duke is generally one of, if you're only going to watch a handful of college basketball teams, Duke is always a good bet because they've always got 4, 5, 6 NBA prospects, first round guys.
Right.
So next season when he's there, that'll be must watch TV. But yeah, so what's happening here is the NBA is loosening things a little bit. So NBA scouts are generally very heavily restricted from attending high school games. They cannot, in any official capacity, walk into a high school gym scouting, and just show up at, they could not show up at Montverde Academy to scout, not without running, follow the rules here. So what they're doing is, while the in-season tournament, which shockingly that Nike planned this, obviously they planned the event knowing the NBA world would be in Las Vegas for this. They've got this event going on, and they're going to let the scouts go to it. There's going to be 5 games throughout the course of this event that they're going to be able to attend, one of which is Montverde Academy playing, and Cooper Flag will play in that game. And then they released, it's like 5 or 6. This is on ESPN. Jonathan Gavoni had it. And it's in there, and he goes through, there's like 5 or 6 other high school events that scouts can now go to as well. So they're loosening it up a little bit to let them. Now, scouts have said, it's funny, teams are of kind of 2 schools of thought on this. They want to be able to go to these big high profile events to see these kids, to get an early jump on scouting them. They do not necessarily want to be, all right, we got a call from somebody in the middle of the middle of Iowa, go check this kid out, because they don't have that many scouts, right? Like, you're stretched so thin. So what they end up doing is, a lot of times it's they rely on their network. They call up, hey, you used to play for me back in the day. Can you go check this kid out for me? And it's informal scouting, but they want to be able to send their own people to see this. So I guarantee every NBA team will be in attendance at this event in Vegas, one way or another. Probably will be a lot of the primary decision makers will be there. So the guys who really kind of run their team's drafts will likely be in attendance to watch him. And, there's a bunch of other good players who are up and coming in this. So that'll be a thing that's going to happen now moving forward. It's been kind of out for, I feel so old, about 20 years now that this has not really been a thing, basically since the one and done rule went away. David Stern basically said, no more, you're not going to high school gyms. And now they're moving it back, in these big events. And this is the right direction with this, I think. I don't want to see Full Scale get back in there, but yeah, if it's these big events, go check them out.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense, particularly as teams are, they need to have as much information on a player as they can before they're going to make the kind of commitment that a high draft pick conveys. They need as much information as possible. So having events like these can certainly be beneficial. All right. I think that about wraps things up here on a Tuesday. It is Tuesday today. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Make sure you do subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to turn on those notifications. And then over on Apple Podcasts, if you wouldn't mind putting a little something in a review, it's a great way to help out the show as well. Thank you, everybody. Till next time. See ya and stay safe.